the other thing that Monero offers that other cryptocurrencies don't is privacy, and therefore the biggest catalyzer for a privacy technology like Monero is the expansion of CBDCs. That's kind of in the short term. I'm trying to envision an event whereby there will be a large-scale privacy invasion that causes people to wish that they had a means to transact outside of that. I don't think that will happen for another 10, 15, maybe 20 years when people's bank accounts just start being turned off. When the social credit score reaches a certain level, that's going to be the massive catalyzer for Monero. And if Monero can just keep building, keep chugging along, keep momentum, keep the groundswell until then, then we've got the the keys to our own handcuffs and the means to seize our own freedom.
Monero Talk is sponsored by Cake Wallet, a trustless, open source wallet that gives you the keys to your crypto. Invoice, donate, and trade your Monero with peace of mind, piece of cake. And by StealthEX, an instant exchange where privacy is a top concern. Go to stealthex.io to instantly exchange between Monero and 450 plus assets without having to create an account or register, and with no limits, making StealthEX a simple way to purchase Monero with crypto anonymously. Monero Talk is also made possible from contributions by viewers and listeners like you, and supporting us is easier than ever by typing in monerotalk.crypto in your monero.com or Cake Wallet send address field to send us a tip. This week on Monero Talk, Douglas Tuman interviews Blake Lovewell, a researcher, writer, and privacy advocate. The two discuss topics related to privacy, censorship resistance, decentralization, Bitcoin, Monero, and the cypherpunk ideology. Blake covers his background researching macroeconomics, politics, and technology. They examine increasing censorship attempts towards Monero, including recent... Monero Talk starts now.
All right. Blake, what's going on, man?
Hey, great to be with you, Doug. Must admit that I'm a big fan, bit of a fanboy, so, it's a real honor to be here in the hot seat where so many other legends in the Monero community have sat.
Thank you. Thank you,
pleasure.
Man.
Great, honestly. I know there are other people out there too, because I was one of those anonymous listeners who you never get to meet, but well, maybe you will get to meet some of them at Monerotopia and events like that, which are really exciting. But yeah, I was one of them. So shout out to those anonymous listeners there, whether you're painting walls, digging holes, or doing some coding, or just sat back and chilling. We're here to hopefully shed some light on Monero and the wider cryptosphere.
Thank you, man. I'm blushing over here. Jeez. Well, it's definitely not a hot seat for you, I don't believe. I mean, I think we're pretty well aligned on our world views and our views on crypto. But before we get into it, why don't you go ahead and give the audience a little bit of an intro with regards to yourself? I'll be honest, I don't know much about you. Tuxedo in the Monero community recommended I reach out to you, and I did a little research today, and I was very impressed with the content you put out. But go ahead and give an intro.
Wow, what an honor. Tux, thanks for the link. Big fan of Tux's work over. You can check it out at tux.pizza. That's his URL. He's doing great work there. I found him through, well, obviously I knew him from Monero Talk and his various work with you, but I somehow didn't click for me until I saw he was writing about Monero Talk, and then I was like, wait, it's the same Tux, it's the same penguin. My name's Blake Lovewell. I'm predominantly a writer. I also do some, content, video and audio stuff to kind of go along with that. I'd say I'm predominantly a researcher. researching topics that interest me and then trying to digest them and write them up for a wider audience, because I feel like many of the problems of the world could be helped by just getting good information out there in a clear and succinct format that people can understand. And far too often people like to have their limited hangout where their understanding is higher than everybody else's, and that gives them the kind of sacred right to rule over that area. And I know that in finance that's definitely one area where that happens, where control is established. My background of interests is from politics originally. I studied politics at university, and quickly realized I didn't want any job to do with politics, because I think if you're getting paid to do anything for politics, you're getting paid to support someone else's politics and not your own. And so I very quickly veered away from that as a sort of career path. And kind of got back into it recreationally probably a few years ago now, maybe about 5 years ago. I still had that lingering urge. I still keep really up to date on the pulse with news, although I have weaned myself off the mainstream media diet, which is not very good for you. There's lots of bad news and lots of things that are intended to make you feel a certain way that may not be the most honorable path. Now I've been deep in research for a great many years now, and certain things stick out to me as important. And so I do a lot of talk and research on economics, particularly macroeconomics, stuff like central bank policies. I've done a lot of research on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. I know that might be a trigger phrase for some of the listeners out there, but we'll get to that shortly, I'm sure. And obviously, you can see by the neon sign, I mean, I need to update it and get a Monero one like you, but I've been in crypto for a good while. So I know my bits and bobs there, although I'm not a coder, and I know you're not a coder too, but we must bow down to the superior knowledge of those sacred few who actually establish these protocols and maintain them and do, the kind of the stuff that we can only dream of, but we can still talk about it, get the news out, and maybe we're able to talk with other humans in a more efficient way than the people who are good at typing on a keyboard too.
What was your pathway to crypto? Did you discover crypto as somebody who already kind of had the anarchist worldview, or maybe that's not appropriate for I don't know exactly where you stand yet, but I get some of that, or was it crypto that kind of led you towards that philosophy?
Well, yeah, I would say I started as an anarchist, and the crypto, in particularly the cypherpunk ideology, stuck out to me. I'd already read Pekka Himanen's Hacker Ethic a long time ago, and I was a big supporter of WikiLeaks work, particularly in 2010, and going forward from there. And so I think probably some of the first stuff I heard about crypto was that when WikiLeaks were kicked off PayPal, or PayPal kicked WikiLeaks off their service, they could no longer receive donations. The only means by which they could receive donations were cryptocurrencies. So, you hear about them through that, and then various other means, digging in the deep depths of the internet. And for a long while, I just would track Bitcoin's price and get really excited that it was going up and there was more adoption. And I didn't have any Bitcoin for, a good couple of years. Maybe I should have jumped in at that point, but, the past is the past, and you get in at the level that you get in at. And now, a few years down the line, I'm glad I got in back then rather than getting in now. Seems like a much more difficult field to get into now. It was a lot more fun, have a punt back then. Now, the stakes seem a little bit higher. And then, I kicked off with Bitcoin. I was never a massive fan of Ethereum. I always thought it played second fiddle to Bitcoin's hegemony. Obviously, I do see plenty of problems with the Bitcoin protocol, and came across Monero a few years later, back when it was still in almost the top 5 cryptos, and we hold out hope that it will regain that mantle one day. In my heart, it's still definitely up there.
Still is a top. It still is a top 5. I mean, it's a top 3, right? It's
exactly. Well, if you get
Bitcoin,
rid of
Ethereum, Monero.
Exactly. Yeah. If you get rid of all the waste of time coins, all the stable coins, all the scammy algorithm AI type weird coins, all you're left with is a real handful, and Monero's on the top of that handful. We don't want to become toxic Bitcoin maximalists, because I listened to Seth for Privacy's podcast, and
that was great.
Absolutely amazing guy, and really positive messages out there, because I agree, it's very easy to get into your own echo chamber, and everything sounds good. We've got a saying in England, if you like the smell of your own farts, you just get off on your own opinions, and you're not looking for counter opinions. But with Bitcoin and with Monero, the best results come from really harsh interrogation. So sometimes your worst enemy can be your best friend, because they're trying to pick holes, they're trying to challenge, they're trying to unsettle and upset the whole thing. And there you can find weaknesses, and there you can also find resolve and strength. It's definitely an interesting sphere to be in at the moment.
So given from the point you got into crypto and discovered crypto to now, how has your viewpoint of crypto evolved?
It has really evolved. Now I'm at the stage where I really think, I found a quote from Hal Finney. I haven't got it on me right now, but he was basically Hal Finney, one of the progenitors of Bitcoin other than Satoshi Nakamoto. He was saying that Bitcoin, he foresees, he had this amazing vision. He foresaw that Bitcoin would become this base layer for international bank settlements, and that Bitcoin transactions would be as rare as gold transactions between central banks. And I'm much more leaning towards that, although he had this opinion probably about 15 years ago. I'm really interested in how Bitcoin, through the ETF kind of phase, is being absorbed into mainstream financial institutions, and what role Bitcoin in particular, but cryptocurrency in general, can play in sort of that tapestry. So when I started, it was kind of magic internet money. Like I say, back then it was a lot more fun and games. Also, then it became number go up. It was very interesting, seeing that, although it was never about cashing out, I was always hodled to the moon. And similarly, I see arguments about Monero that you should try and spend it to create the circular economy. I think it's 50-50 to spend some, save some, because, if you're in Monero and you understand the value of privacy, then you probably do agree that Monero is incredibly undervalued, that it has a long way to go up, as its enemy, surveillance capitalism, has a a long way to go in the opposite direction.
I think some of us take that some of us take that a little too far, right? In the Monero community of just use Monero, or I think maybe kind of it's misinterpreted a little bit. It came from the earlier days of with that meme
trying to gain adoption.
Don't buy Monero, right? Was the great marketing meme in the early days with the warning where it may have adverse effects on the financial system, right, or the state apparatus. And I think it went over a lot of people's heads. Obviously, not me or you or the ones who stuck around, right? I think it was very effective at weeding out the true believers, the true cypherpunks, right? I kind of saw it as an effective tool for that, but I think it's since been kind of overblown a little bit and misused to where people say, you should never hold Monero, just use it as a tool for transacting. And I tend to agree with you. It's clearly both. I mean, if it works as intended, which it does, and it's growing in adoption for that use case, then given Metcalfe's law, right? As more people are using it, the value of the system as a whole will go up.
Exactly, and we're kind of at a weird crossroads at the moment with Monero in particular, where since the delisting from Binance, OKX, I mean, that's most of the centralized exchanges. We're down to stuff like local Monero. I'm a fan of Trade Ogre as well for exchanging, but we're down to the bare bones of a functional economy with Monero, and the only way is up in terms of growth and adoption and stuff like that. But it's also a very difficult time for people to on-ramp. But yeah, so it's a really super interesting time. One thing I was going to mention in this sort of timeline of awakening to privacy. Well, ever since the Snowden revelations, the NSA leaks, it kind of all ties in with the WikiLeaks theme. That made me really aware of surveillance to a high degree. And I think back in the 2012 era, people were becoming aware that there was this dragnet surveillance of all internet activity. And it still felt like there were things you could do. You could block trackers on your browser. You could, install all of these various different layers of protection for yourself. Online at least, and I feel like that by now, 10 or plus years down the line, people have become so disillusioned that they kind of accept a huge amount of surveillance as a given, and don't bother trying to obfuscate their tracks. They'll just give their fingerprint to their phone, give the biometric data to the phone, or computer, or both, give your iris scan to the airport. All of this would be considered an egregious assault on your privacy 10, 15 years ago. And so I think it's kind of a weird galvanizing effect that those Snowden revelations had on people, because at first it's shock and, how can they do unwarranted wiretapping without going through the court procedure and all of that. And now it's kind of accepted, and people just kind of accept your GPS is tracking wherever you go, and you accept that your bank is surveilling every transaction that you do.
Because I guess, and I'm sure you'd agree, a lot of it has to do with it just being an evil system that's in place where the people are kept fat and happy as they're caged, right? And there's just enough dopamine being fed to us that we're okay with the state of things, even though we're basically enslaving ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's the Brave New World metaphor, right? With the soma, you have the constant pleasure. Fed enough that you will do what you're told to receive more of it, but enough that you are docile, that you won't revolt. And then we've got that multiplied by the 1984, total surveillance and the subservience to the state, which I think we all witnessed in 2020, wherever in the world we are. Something that I think happened then is that there was a massive browbeating of the general population, and I think I'll be the first to admit there's definitely some trauma associated with that. I probably align with lots of the anarchists listening, felt that there was an egregious overreach by the state. But whatever political persuasion you were, there's trauma with that, and I think people haven't really dealt with that properly. And so there's various different eras of that. 2020 was definitely a large one. 2008 and 9 was a very important one for finance, because that was when there was a massive theft of value from the system, and that was the start of the rampant quantitative easing. Though I wouldn't say that 2008-9 was the start of financial criminality. I mean, I would start that in about the 1970s, where that kind of took over as the dominant thread. When the US went off the gold standard, you had this kind of rampant financialization. The US hegemony was expanded through, after the failure of Vietnam, they tried to expand it through kind of the back door, installing dictators, doing color revolutions and stuff like that. But yeah, as you were saying, the evil system. It is all too easy to think of the world outside as evil, but I'm sort of relentlessly optimistic as well. Because I know if you're not optimistic, then what are you fighting for? So I'll always bounce back with that. But
we try to keep it positive over here, you know. I'm Monero,
well, I always
right?
see you with a smile on your face.
So where does your positivity come from? What do you see as the avenue to, you know, towards humanity escaping dystopia?
That's such a good question. I think that everyone harbors utopian ideals, whether you want to see your street have less litter, whether you want to see your local farmer accepting Monero for vegetables, or whether it's wishing for peace in various different war-torn regions in the world. Everyone's got their utopian ideals, and I think that if everybody were acting in tune with those utopian ideals, then we'd be in a lot better of a place. I will admit that not all utopian ideals are great, because most evil dictators had a utopia they were trying to achieve. Pol Pot in Cambodia, by killing all of the scientists or people with glasses, because he thought the intelligentsia were presenting this threat. Maybe that's one utopia too far, but those are the exceptions, maybe the exceptions that prove the rule, because I think in general most people have a benign base state, and so encouraging people to act on those utopian ideals, or at least align themselves with that higher purpose, is, I think, a good way to manifest positive change. As to where does optimism come from? Yeah, I don't know. It's really complex and probably quite personal and spiritual. I'm not particularly religious, but I definitely think there's a great bit more to life than maybe meets the eye, or at least than the mechanical, scientific, predominant ideology of our times us with. If you kind of ignore that, you ignore that at your own peril or your own loss.
More specifically, with regards to Monero, we're talking about, the fact that the vast majority of humans don't seem to care that they're being led down this path towards dystopia, and there's a small minority. There's the cypherpunks and other liberty fighters. What do you see as specifically being some ideas of what the path forward may be that would allow Monero to succeed on a larger level?
Great question, and that brings us back to Monero, because I was worried we'd be going down the spiritual crisis angle, which I wasn't ready for.
You don't want to go too far down that angle.
Up for that one. Yeah. It's interesting when you mentioned how, in general, people seem to be obsequious to the dystopia. I was listening to something about CBDCs in India, central bank digital currencies in India, and they have a digital rupee. It hasn't had a lot of take up yet, but they're still piloting, as many countries are around the world, piloting these CBDCs. But they said there that the internet penetration is still around 50%. So 50% of the people in India don't have internet yet. Or at least consistent internet access, or mobile phone signal to a high enough degree to run internet. But I visited India, and India to me was a very internet entwined culture already. And, Bangalore is one of the global hubs for internet and technology-based industry. So it was kind of surprising to me to see that the statistics, that the Indian data collected still showed such low reach of the internet. And so, we can kind of see in like a modern country like the UK or the US, that there's a huge amount of internet penetration, and most people are on board. You see people on the train, I think, a huge percentage of them will be on their phone scrolling most of the journey. But that's not true of the whole world, and India is a country with over 1 billion population. So maybe not everybody is in the exact same as well. And it's hard to kind of think outside of our own box. So that gives me one avenue for optimism, that there's a long way to go before the whole world population are slavish drones with microchips that, march to the sound of the drum of Big Brother. As to bringing this back round to Monero and the cypherpunk ideology, I think that necessity is the mother of invention. Whenever there is a market crash, such as the Weimar crash in Germany in between World War I and II, people have to find means to transact when the currency is inflating rampant. Monero is set up and ready. It's like one small download of a wallet, a piece of technology away from manifesting. So that's ready in there. That won't reach the 50% of India that are off grid, and maybe they are blessed by not having to have recourse yet for Monero. But I know that there is a large amount of Bitcoin adoption going on in India too. And so as those people come online, they will be onboarding into a world where Bitcoin is already prevalent, and where Bitcoin goes, so can Monero. I think that they can go hand in hand. I don't think it's worth bemoaning Bitcoin. It exists. It's already tied in with a lot of things too. There's a term, backdooring, which is what agencies do to break into laptops and phones. They'll, find some vulnerability and, access the hardware that way, and then they can surveil it or, access and do whatever they'd like to. Well, I think the same thing can be done by the cypherpunks backdooring wherever an opportunity arises. In terms of Monero, it's, mentioning it to anybody who wishes to transact financially with you as an alternative, and offering a discount. But obviously we don't want to just bang on like that to our relatives that have no idea how to log into their phone, let alone download the GUI wallet and run the command line and so on. But cypherpunks, cypherpunks write code, and that's kind of the where it ties in, and having a healthy skepticism of solutions offered, or conveniences in particular, not simply taking the most convenient route, but thinking about what that may cost you, not in financial terms, but potentially so. But the convenience comes at a very high cost, often of privacy in particular, where you give up your, if you download a browser extension, this browser extension wants access to your history, bookmarks, contacts, the rest of the desktop. It's a convenient browser extension, but do I want to, basically pay with all of my data? The answer should be no. People often think their data is worthless, but in this economy, your data, personal information, is the probably one of the more important currencies that you have to barter with. And if you give that away for free, then you're giving away your gold, your own personal sovereignty. So maybe realigning some things ideologically is a good start as well.
What do you see as being maybe some of the events that will take place that will enlighten people about Monero?
Well, almost every year I see something coming down the line where I think this is it. This is the big one, the big economic crash. Having witnessed 2008 and 9, and that was probably a formative experience for me, because I went deep on it, trying to understand the derivatives bubble, how it was affecting people, what was going on there. I think something like a crash is one of the big facilitators for Monero. at least for cryptocurrency, I would say, in a broad sense, because cryptocurrency, as Christine Lagarde has said, is a bit of an escape valve. And, Obama said it's a Swiss bank in your pocket. I think Monero is much more of a Swiss bank in your pocket than Bitcoin is.
Exactly.
So a crash is definitely a big catalyzer for cryptocurrency in general. The state of cryptocurrency right now, though, it seems to be really institutionalizing. Bitcoin's going into ETF territory and being, adopted by JP Morgan and BlackRock. Some of the worst, horrible institutions in the world are getting deeply involved, and whether it can escape their tentacles and carry on with its own agenda that's up for grabs right now. And simultaneously, as we mentioned earlier, most of the top 50 cryptocurrencies are kind of stable coins, which stable coins can easily be tied into a CBDC system, or weird algorithmic versions of Ethereum that don't really offer anything, but they're probably speculative assets more than they are functional technologies. So we can kind of abandon a lot of the cryptocurrency stuff if we're really focused in on Monero. And the other thing that Monero offers that other cryptocurrencies don't is privacy, and therefore the biggest catalyzer for a privacy technology like Monero is the expansion of CBDCs. That's kind of in the short term. I'm trying to envision an event whereby there will be a large-scale privacy invasion that causes people to wish that they had a means to transact outside of that. I don't think that will happen for another 10, 15, maybe 20 years when people's bank accounts just start being turned off. When the social credit score reaches a certain level, that's going to be the massive catalyzer for Monero. And if Monero can just keep building, keep chugging along, keep momentum, keep the groundswell until then, then we've got the the keys to our own handcuffs and the means to seize our own freedom. But events like a large-scale, event that would catalyze that, I'm not so sure. In terms of CBDCs, whilst we're here, I actually believe that we're in the CBDC system already. There's not going to be a day when the US goes, here's the central bank digital currency version of the US dollar, the digital dollar, 2027, and suddenly all the dollars are digitized and everyone is up in arms. 98% of the dollars are already digital. The Federal Reserve already operates an instant payment service. They're already with all of the banks in terms of digital IDs, and all of the large banks in the US, as well as around the world, are involved in blockchain technologies. I wrote an article last year, I believe, called The 7 Pillars of the CBDC System. If you're interested, it's quite long-winded going into each of those 7 pillars, but I believe most of them are already in place. However, it's kind of like Bitcoin. There was already Hashcash, eCash, all of these different technologies, and Nakamoto really just tied them all together into one protocol, as well as solving a couple of other, the double spend problem and stuff. With CBDCs, I think what we're waiting for is for one nation state to tie all of these technologies together and create the sort of big bad CBDCs system that's going to come out. But I think we're already system, and so I don't foresee one explosive event that will galvanize people and suddenly we'll have everyone flowing into Monero. I think it'll be lots of little battles. I believe there's even one going on right now as we speak. There's a huge number of transactions in the memory pool for Monero. I was just checking a few hours ago. Really exciting and interesting, and seeing how Monero is able to flex and expand its capacity to deal with a higher number of transactions. It's kind of another test for Monero, and whether that's to do with the the all-time high flirting that Bitcoin is doing right now with all the ETF hype, we don't know, because with Monero it's completely anonymous. No one knows which wallet is doing what, but we can tell just some statistics that there are a huge number of transactions going on right now. And so perhaps right now we're even in one of these battles. And there's the phrase "death by 1,000 cuts." Perhaps Monero can be victorious with 1,000 small successes.
I like it. How about you talk about CBDCs? How about Bitcoin? Do you see Bitcoin as worst case effectively becoming a pseudo CBDC? Or a tool for mass surveillance? Do you see that scenario potentially coming to pass, or do you think that's a little overblown? And given the nature of cryptocurrency, there will be ways for people to always obfuscate and kind of move out of the eye of the surveiller.
Well, I think we are in the worst case of Bitcoin. Unfortunately, there was, the block wars took up a lot of people's time and intrigue, in about 2015-16, and it all became about the size of the blocks. And then we lost the battle to Blockstream, and Blockstream kind of took over the management of the code base of Bitcoin, and now there's no ability to change or insert any privacy Bitcoin. It's not really possible to do anything with like smart contracts or DeFi or anything like that. And I know that the Lightning Network is also much lauded, but struggling to live up to the promises that were made when Lightning came about. So I'd say Bitcoin is in trouble. Yeah. And in terms of surveillance, Bitcoin is, the panopticon. It's fully surveillable. The only difficult part for a totalitarian state is tying the wallet to the person. But once you've done that, every single transaction, every amount, the date and time, the heuristics of every transaction as well. And you can draw a network of links between people. And, it's kind of a wet dream for a financial surveillance economy, which is the one we're moving into. So, it kind of makes sense that it took a few years for the mainstream finance to digest Bitcoin and start to understand it. Meanwhile, there were bubbles in NFTs and, initial offerings, ICOs. Those bubbles have passed, and now we're into the ETF potentially bubble. Who knows? But I think that Bitcoin is, beleaguered and beset by problems, historic problems, and unable to solve them. But it has this huge momental force in finance because the fundamentals of having a scarce asset outside of the standard financial system is still such a draw. It's a new locus for finance to revolve around, a new attractor, a gravitic attractor, as if a new large planet had moved into our solar system. All of the orbits of the planets are really shifting, and we're only really at the start of that too. It does bode very well for Monero long-term, because you can get from Bitcoin into Monero, Bitcoin and Monero can be best buddies because Bitcoin can be the settlement layer that, JP Morgan and BlackRock are also tied into. It can be the gold that central banks have to have some of to back of their assets at all. But any bank or any institution, it can be the settlement layer. And then if you want to, transact anonymously or move your Bitcoin without being surveilled at all, you simply swap it into Monero. I think that one of the most pivotal technologies is the atomic swap between Bitcoin and different cryptocurrencies to get between the two. But that atomic swap really offers the, privacy and, all of the benefits that we know Monero has, but offers that to any other cryptocurrency that you can atomic swap into. Now, I know that also very much, in the nascency, they're 8.5 months pregnant. They're not quite born yet. But I do hold a lot of faith. Like I said earlier, necessity being the mother of invention. As Monero is delisted here, there, and everywhere, people aren't interested in building more centralized exchanges or even decentralized exchanges unless they have protocol level ability to do stuff like atomic swaps. And I think that's going to be one of the things coming from the Monero side that offers tools in those small battles with delistings or with central bank digital currency rollouts and so on. The ability to swap in without man is going to be massive.
Do you love coffee and Monero as much as we do? Consider making gratuitous.org your daily cup. Pay with Monero for premium fresh beans, and if you like what you taste, send a digital cash tip directly to the farmers that made it possible. Proceeds help us grow this channel, Gratuitous, and Monero.
Agreed. We're breaking up a little bit. I don't know how it is on your end when I'm talking, but I think we'll be okay. I don't know if it's your internet or mine, but I think we'll be good. We'll be good. Do you think you mentioned Monero essentially being more akin to a Swiss bank than Bitcoin, right? And you just kind of explained why. Do you think that could potentially be a moment that happens that could move people towards Monero? Bitcoiners coming to this realization, some kind of event, I don't know, as extreme as a government trying to confiscate crypto, and Bitcoiners realizing they can't lose their keys in a boating accident, or I don't know, the assessment of unrealized capital gains on cryptocurrency. Yes. And once again, Bitcoiners, getting caught in fraudulent boating accidents. What are your thoughts on those ideas?
Yeah, I think we're close. We're seeing the sun setting on the boating accident being the valid method by which you can make all of your financial decisions just go away. It's going to be more and more difficult if we're looking in particular at the mic of in the EU. They're looking to very strictly regulate centralized exchanges. I'd couple that with Chainalysis, the big company that is involved in crunching all of the data on various blockchains, including Bitcoins, to figure out who's doing what at what time. There is massive expansion in those technologies because they are a means of control. Central control, which is what I call like the governments and international institutions. Central control always seeks more control. Bitcoin was something outside of their control. Slowly but surely, through different strands, they seek to bring it under their control. The ETS is definitely one way by which that can be done. By controlling the price, you can control how the market is working. I think that Chainalysis and stymieing, a chilling effect can go a long way. Delisting of XMR from Binance, I believe, was intended to be a chilling effect from the US, particularly the Securities Exchange Committee, the SEC, to try and put people off Monero, the pressure that they put onto Binance. But I think it hasn't really done that. It's only taken about a week, and the price is already back to where it was before. It's like quite a, like I said earlier, we're at a really critical juncture. And what we do now can have very large impacts in the future. What seems a fairly innocuous act, like buying Monero when the price is, because of the Binance delisting, or people making posts online just kind of talking about their truths. Those things, they can be the seeds that are planted to grow a forest in the future, and that's why I think the time is always now to take these actions, and for paths forwards. It's just it's like we have the power in our hands, and Monero is this tool that's incredibly powerful. And I know we're preaching to the choir here, so it's about how can we get that word out further without being too evangelical and browbang. It's a difficult sell because people are very comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were literally leading me to the next question I had in my mind, which is why I brought up your website, looking at some of the articles you've published and this TNT radio show that you've been on quite a few times. Your tent is much larger than just Monero. You're out there talking about topics beyond Monero, right? All I think ultimately related to these concepts of liberty. But you're not just like me talking about Monero all day. So you're doing, I think people like you are in a great position to really get the word out beyond the Monero faithful and to no longer just preach to the choir. What kind of response or do you sense you're getting from people in your camp that maybe don't really know much at all about crypto? Do you see these people finding interest in Monero when you bring it up?
Well, I do. My tent much wider. I do cover a lot of topics. Whenever I do come onto cryptocurrency, I do always slip Monero in there. I always mention but there are privacy coins, and I must mention Monero as one of the best ones, and that kind of goes into most of my stuff because I would love to do Monero full time. To be honest, it's definitely one of my loves. What reception it gets is, by and large, still with cryptocurrency, even with this one, Bitcoin, it gets resistance. If people don't understand a thing, they don't want to be, they don't want to admit that they don't understand something, so they'd rather, block it off. So often, people, when confronted with something they don't understand, they'll resist that. They may have even done some research or heard something, or most people will have a family member, friend, associate, somebody they've met who has been a total crypto nut. And often that does more harm than good to the cause if, evangelizing was their aim, because often they invest in something and then lose all their money, or they lose all their friends, but still have a big stack of sats to hold for it. So I do meet a lot of resistance. Even today, I did a show on TNT, and it's a really interesting network, because there's such a wide variety of views, and there was definitely resistance even to talking about Bitcoin, even though I was kind of hedging my bets one way or the other, because I was mentioning the problems with surveillance, I was mentioning the problems with ETFs, as well as some of the potential upsides that it offers. So I think one of the largest things is overcoming that initial resistance, and people can see that in evidence in the real world. If you find the right case study, suddenly it clicks for people. Whether it's that quote I said, Obama saying you have a Swiss bank in your pocket. That's Obama. To me, he's a bad guy. He executes wars in foreign lands. He works for big banks. I think he's a Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan type. And, we can say much worse things too. But to some people, he's just a regular, maybe he was a good president, he was a nice guy, he's well-spoken. So if you use the Obama quote, maybe that's the best way. I think the phrase horses for courses, you have to choose the right way for each audience, or the right way to put it in. In one of my articles, I I delved into cryptocurrencies versus CBDCs, and it's, I was aiming this at the person who'd never heard of cryptocurrencies, never heard of CBDCs. And it's really a different perspective, because you have to really baby step through every single part of it. And these things like Monero is a very revelatory concept to explain. It's like truly anonymous digital cash, a way of holding value over time. It's unsurveillable. It's so simple. It can exist on anyone's computer, even an old computer, or especially an old computer. Sometimes that's the best thing to be doing. It's immensely revelatory. So talking about it is hard. It's hard to stick with, down to earth modes of speech. But yeah, choosing the right time and the right phrase and the right idea, that can go a long way to doing so.
It'd be nice to see an article on like why digital cash matters, or the importance of digital cash, or I think you would knock that one out of the park. This TNT radio show, tell us about it. Is it like they got a lot of followers, a lot of listeners? Is this I really don't know much about it.
Well, I don't have my own show on there. I'm a regular guest for a journalist, Patrick Henningsen, also a good friend. We agree a lot on geopolitics, and it's a network based out of Australia that kind of came to the fore. It was kind of created in the 2020 era. Of resistance to sort of lockdown type of thing. So it brought together a kind of smorgasbord of different alternative voices. So it's a very interesting network, and it's got some financial backing, but it's trying to find its own feet as well as an independent media voice. I think it's it's treading a very fine line sometimes between being censored for some of the content that's put out there, because you remember in the 2020 and the 2021 era, on most social media, certain words and phrases could get you sin binned and get your account frozen. And for people who depend on that income from their podcast, from their website, from their blog post, or whatever it is, to be kicked off of those services is a massive problem. And so TNT kind of did offer something of a way for people to still produce that material, and yet not kick off. I wouldn't align myself fully with TNT, the network. It's not my network, but I do talk on there. And I think that things like TNT, independent media, things like Monero Talk are invaluable. And that's kind of most of the content that I digest is independent media. If I'm doing some decorating, I'm listening to all the Monero Talk, all the different, tech stuff. I'm listening to stuff from Goldbugs as well. That's my guilty pleasure, is listening to Goldbugs saying how the whole economy is going to crash. And that's where I pick up a lot of information about, the FDIC and different machinations of central banks and stuff like that. And that's where that's the pipeline by which I pick up different interesting stories and then try and digest them, because I think, how is the average Joe going to understand, the closing of this window of, 2-year treasury bond, what that means for the Bloomberg, like, the 2-year treasury bond is down, this is the end of the world, So, trying to marry those two is really interesting. I see you've got my of interest page there with my Monero donation QR code and some interesting quotes.
Yeah, I brought it up. You got the Julia Assange quote: "Censorship is always cause for celebration. It is always an opportunity because it reveals fear of reform. It means that the power position is so weak that you have got to care what people think." I think that's relevant to Monero, right? With the attempts to basically ban it and censor it in those terms, censor people from even knowing it exists. We're seeing these attacks, And yeah, I think most people in the Monero community are celebrating that as a win, right? That it must mean we're doing something right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely. And, it's often bemoaned as the kind of coin of drug dealers and dark nets. And I've seen recent articles trying to take the far right or extreme right angled, things like that, trying to, guilt by association. But very rarely do they have any evidence of that. And part of Monero's anonymity is that there is no evidence. There's no paper trail. There's no anything like that. And I haven't seen it being implicated in any large thing. I do remember, I don't know if it was John Oliver, I believe a few years ago, he gave the metaphor that Monero is like buying a large amount of coffins, human-sized coffins, and then he said something like, you don't know what I'm going to do with these coffins. I just need them for my own personal purposes. But kind of implying that it's so obviously for crime that what can you but crime with it, which is kind of really interesting. But having Monero.
Yeah, that was classic.
It was talked about on national TV, though. That's a cause for celebration. I remember it was being celebrated.
Yeah. It was great. It was a great moment.
But yeah, and likewise, Julian Assange, he is testament to that because he's still in Belmarsh prison in the UK. He's been there now for 5 years, having been in the Ecuadorian embassy for 9 years before that, under basically being arrested for over a decade now. And that's because he has the ability to speak to spread such powerful truths that the state or the global state or the powers that be or whatever you want to call them, they can't handle him being free and unleashed. He has to be clamped down upon. Yet the technology he helped create with WikiLeaks enables people to leak documents fully anonymously. Although through various different means, Ed Snowden, Chelsea Manning, various other leakers have been discovered. You remember Seth Rich as well, the DNC leaker. It's never been confirmed as WikiLeaks policy to never reveal them, but we know probably it's likely that some of these leakers were the people behind that information. But it kind of shows how desperate they are. Because he's in jail with no political charges. There's no judicial case against him, other than the US wants him extradited into, a black box somewhere, never to be seen again. Yet the people were out. I was there on the streets of London just over a week ago, protesting outside the Royal Courts of Justice. I actually made it into the Royal Courts of Justice, and the feeling was overwhelmingly positive. Like there was change there, that people weren't going to put up with it anymore, and that pressure from below, be it from the truckers' rallies or in particular the farmers' protests that are spreading the world over, that kind of groundswell that doesn't get reported in mainstream media, that fosters a new generation of independence. And I only think we're a few steps away from tying these movements together to have a more free and open quorum or group of people discussing interesting political ideas and manifesting changes, positive changes in the world. So it really is exciting times. And whilst we're on the Assange protest note, one more thing, I did crowdfund some stickers, some free Assange stickers using Monero on kuno.hand.media. They run a donation system whereby using a certain feature of the Monero wallet, they can track donations into a certain wallet if you give them the secret view key. And I was able to receive one Monero, one XMR of donations from about 10 different people towards these stickers, which I got printed at a local sticker shop, and took them up to the protest, gave them out. And then looking back at some of the footage from the day even on mainstream media, I saw people wearing this sticker on their lapel. And in that way, people, all around the world, I don't know who you anonymous donators were. Maybe some of you are watching right now, but thank you, because you were able to change by donating a small Monero through a kind of a not-for-profit fundraising piece of technology, using a certain aspect of the Monero wallet that's really cleverly made, and that manifested something in the real world. And so more of this sort of thing. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, we talk about Kuno all the time on Monerotopia, and Kuno was built by Anarchio, who is now building XMR Bazaar for us. Great guy.
And that's your marketplace.
Yes, XMR Bazaar, and big fan of Kuno as well. Trying to push that and grow that, and I can't wait to. I'm glad it worked out for you, but I can't wait to see people like the Canadian truckers or like the farmers, right? These farmers we're talking about. I can't wait to see these, or people that are protesting in support of Julian Assange start to use Kuno as their tool for fundraising. Any thoughts on how we can facilitate that and push that forward?
Well, we mentioned the truckers, and one of the big stories to come out of the truckers was debanking that people who donated Bitcoin to the truckers, who Canadian state, were punished and debanked. And that was Bitcoin or bank donations, but by and large, it was actually Bitcoin donations. So there we had an opportunity for Bitcoin to be this, revolutionary cypherpunk sort of anti-state tool, and it failed that test because it was so surveillable that people who donated in good faith, thinking you're just donating to a trucker, just to a private wallet, what's the problem with that? Because there was not good OPSEC, because operating Bitcoin privately requires a huge amount of foreknowledge, and one slip can totally reveal the whole operation. Monero is more foolproof in that sense. I wouldn't go as far as to say idiot-proof, but is anything idiot-proof? But it's simple enough that it has privacy on the base layer. And so if you have farmer protests and, moving forward, whatever kinds of protests, money greases the wheels, like it or not. But using money to grease those in an anonymous way is a much better option. So simply by promoting Kuno at the right time, you're doing God's work there, Doug.
Thank you, man. You too. I'm looking at Julian Assange. You're reminding me that actually he was really, it was this book. I don't know if have you read this? Mm-hmm. Freedom and the Future of the Internet, Julian Assange. Yeah, I mean, it was that book that really ignited or deepened my understanding of the importance of censorship resistance and that aspect of cryptocurrency. And I wish I had read the book earlier. I had bought it before I really had gotten into Bitcoin. I had heard of Bitcoin, but had yet to stop and understand it and realize, it's decentralized, all that. But I had bought this book, and it sat on my shelf for like a year. Maybe I had just read the first 30 pages of it, or 20 pages or something, and put it down. And then once I got into Bitcoin and read the white paper, I was like, wait a minute. Let me go back to that. Like, what did Julian Assange say about Bitcoin? I open up the book and, go to the glossary and start reading. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have read this a couple of years ago. And it was it really solidified my understanding. And it ultimately is what pushed me towards Monero, was understanding, once again, the importance of the free speech aspects of this, right? censorship-resistant, free speech money.
Totally.
Really. And that how important it is that we continue to have a tool that gives people the ability to practice free speech through money, that we need that in society for free and open societies to flourish in the digital age. Do you think Julian Assange is a Monero advocate, or any thoughts on that?
Well, WikiLeaks, I think it's 2014, when they were debanked by PayPal, they accepted Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a few others, including Zcash, and they were early on board with Zcash, and this was probably before Monero was even a thing. I know that now Assange would definitely support Monero. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, it's interesting because you were mentioning Monero is like freedom of speech money, but Monero doesn't talk. Monero is numbers, by and large. It's all sorts of different protocols and stuff like that, but it's not a political, it doesn't have a big label on it. You can use it for whatever you want. But by using it, we're able to act politically and establish our, our free rights as sovereign individuals.
Exactly. Where you put your money is just probably as valuable as what you say, right? It is a form of speech. I kind of asked the same question about Edward Snowden, right? You had brought him up earlier. What do you think that's all about? The fact that Snowden, because it seems like you've investigated these guys pretty well. You follow these guys pretty closely. Why do you think he's never been kind of a big Monero voice? He's a Zcash guy. Any thoughts on what's going on there? I always found that a bit concerning, and I wonder, so Assange, I get. Yeah, we haven't heard from him for unfortunate reason.
Yeah.
We haven't really heard him talking about cryptocurrency. But Snowden has had the global stage, the ears of freedom fighters around the world, and he really hasn't muttered much about Monero.
Hey, sorry, I lost you there for a second. I just had to check my
losing power.
You've asked about Snowden, and yeah, it's all good. We're back online. Snowden does talk. He has Twitter, and before Julian Assange was the embassy, Assange did have Twitter, and that was one of his most powerful tools, I would say. Was the Twitter account that's able to run the world from prison in the embassy. Ed Snowden is also imprisoned in Russia, not by the Russian state, but he's trapped there, and his freedom is severely restricted by his status as persona non grata to the USA. But he does talk on Twitter, and he doesn't mention Monero by name, hasn't done yet, but he's very embedded in the crypto world. He does often talk about that. One thing I found most interesting of his latest tweets was his very cryptic reference that he believes a nation state is building up stacks of Bitcoin in secret, and it'll build. I don't know if you've heard too of Mr. 100, who's been buying 100 Bitcoin a day. I know that Max Kaiser too has mentioned that it might be Qatar, and then we have the Qatari representative flying to El Salvador, Bitcoin country, and going to one of the big Bitcoin fairs there. And so potentially there, Snowden has revealed, I don't know why he can't reveal them by name. Potentially he'd be revealing his source or something like that. But he's revealing that there are big moves, nation state level moves being made in Bitcoin. In terms of Monero, I think, don't know why, I can only speculate, but I think that for someone like Snowden, he's already got his ballpark, that is NSA, that is surveillance, and that is his own leaks and stuff like that. To go outside of your own remit, you have to be so sure of what you're doing and perhaps for him to promote Monero, which to some may be the dangerous queen of internet pirates and so on, might be a step too far. And he's got to stick to his ballpark. As I mentioned there, with the kind of Qatar story, he's having to self-regulate his speech there. So we don't know why, but we can always pester him with DMs and questions. We can even ask him to come on Monero Talk. He may well come on because, he's similar to a John McAfee, maybe a slightly more sober John McAfee.
I tried getting him on. Yeah, I tried getting him on a few years ago, and I communicated with him and his assistant. And at one point, we almost had him, and he wanted us to pay him. And I agreed to do it, and it was a significant amount of money. My thought was I would raise it from the Monero community. I think it was like 10 grand or 20 grand. It was a very high number. And then so I said, "Can we pay you in Monero?" And that's kind of when things went sour. I don't think necessarily for that reason. He said, he was getting busy with other things or something. That was my experience with Snowden. So I don't know, and then I changed it to, we'll pay you in other means if you need. So I'm a little sus. I'm a little sus of Snowden, right? I use Monero as my barometer for how true a freedom fighter is.
Your litmus test.
Because I understand my litmus test, right? Because I understand it's very well, and I know where I stand, and then I can kind of measure somebody else, especially if I know they have access to the information. So that's where I'm coming from with my opinion of him.
Yeah, but
I hope to be proven wrong.
Somebody, yeah. Just because somebody does something good doesn't mean they're a good person. Just because somebody does something bad doesn't mean they're a bad person. And Snowden's NSA leaks revealed, what many of us kind of knew was going on, but in such a way that was intense, unignorable, very well documented, and risked his life to do so. So that is a good thing. And what you mentioned there, you never know what the hell is going on in Snow. His whole journey to Russia was, escaping the claws of the United States, just out of their grasp.
All that risk,
an expensive lifestyle. Yeah. All that risk he took, right? And it was an extreme amount of risk, and it was for the betterment of society and improving liberty around the world. And here, there's very little risk in tweeting about Monero or talking about it openly, yet he refrains from doing it. So I don't know. Maybe he has some good motive that I'm not aware of. Potentially, Blake. He's offering cryptic tweets here and there. He's not so direct. Monero is a true litmus test. Perhaps that's the A grade, and then the B grade is Bitcoin, and then you can go down the levels from there, and until someone passes that. But right now, there's only an elite few who are in the Monero A grade. But it's an honor to be amongst them.
Blake, thank you so much, man, for jumping on. I know our connection wasn't the best, but I think it will work out, and we'll edit it. But greatly appreciate you taking the time. Anything you want to put out there before we close it out?
Yeah, apologies if the connection was from my end. We're in the internet age, and you'd think we'd be beyond this point right now. I saw an interest off, though, that in the last 10 years was completely level. They haven't got any faster, despite the technology having improved and despite fiber optic cables being laid. that kind of shows how far we've come, and yet how far we have to go. The last things I would just give a shout out, Seth for Privacy, his previous podcast was amazing, and all the people he highlighted too, the kind of the grunts, the code monkeys doing the real hard work that enable us to have this freedom technology, the unsung heroes. We should definitely ditch them out. I also want XYZ, another one of your guests. His was really interesting, and I intended writing the book that he wrote, and he's done it for me. So yeah, check out his work too. Shout out to any supporters of that anonymous Kuno fundraiser too. Anyone out there fighting the good fight. And it's been a pleasure talking with you, Doug. And I hope to put forward the good word of Monero wherever possible.
Thank you so much, man. If you just want to say it, though, where can people find you and follow you, get in touch with you?
Well, I'm big so I don't have social, but you can find my work regularly updated at blakelovewell.com. That's basically where you'll find me. blakelovewell.com. All right, man. Cheers, brother. Hopefully we'll see you at Monerotopia. I don't know if that's in the cards at all. I know it's probably pretty far from where you are, but that would be cool. Is it in Argentina this year?
It's going to be in Buenos Aires in Argentina in November.
Very interesting. I'll see if I can, put my cards in order and see what we can do. I know that there's a Prague arm of the Monero community too in Czechia.
Yes.
And that's a bit closer too. But we'll see what we can do. These real world meetups are definitely really, these real world meetups are definitely so important.
Yeah, definitely try to get to one or the other. You won't be disappointed. All right, man. So great meeting you and nice talking with you. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode. We release new episodes every week. You can find and subscribe to our show on YouTube, Odyssey, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Go to monerotalk.live to subscribe for a full list of places where you can watch and listen. If you want to interact with us, guests, or other podcast listeners, you can follow us on Twitter. And please leave us a review on iTunes. It helps people find the show, and we are always happy to read them. So thanks so much, and we look forward to being back next week.